A new proposal from the Jordanians to quell Israeli-Palestinian violence placed the contested Al-Aqsa Mosque under 24-hour video surveillance. Israel's also promised to maintain the tradition that only Muslims, not Jews, can pray at the Jerusalem site, an issue at the center of the recent violence. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Israel has an interest in cameras being deployed everywhere in the Temple Mount. First of all, to refute the claim that Israel is changing the status quo. Secondly, to show where the provocations are really coming from, and also to thwart them from the outset.
The proposal was hailed by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry.
Now, I am also very pleased to announce today that Prime Minister Netanyahu has agreed to what I think is an excellent suggestion by King Abdullah to provide 24-hour video coverage of all sites on the Temple Mount, Haram al-Sharif. This will provide comprehensive visibility and transparency, and that could really be a game changer in discouraging anybody from disturbing the sanctity of this holy site. So, today I hope we can begin to turn the page on this very difficult period. We have to join together in calling for an immediate end to violence. We must stress the importance of avoiding provocative actions and rhetoric, and we must work cooperatively. It's the only way to go forward, is to work cooperatively to restore calm. And by restoring calm, we can get back to the critical effort of achieving a lasting peace.
But the idea is being met with skepticism from Palestinian residents of Jerusalem.
All these agreements are doomed to fail. Kerry came to the region to save Israel. He comes here to save us? He would not save us.
Palestine Liberation Organization Executive Committee member Wasil Youssef says Kerry is missing the point.
He jumps over the main cause and root of the problem, which is the criminal occupation that carries out all sorts of criminal acts against the Palestinian people.
Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki calls the proposal a trap and accuses Israel of planning to use the video to arrest Muslim worshippers it suspects of inciting violence.
Rein in the violence. If not, there will be no money. That's the message U.S. Congress sent to Palestinian leaders when it cut their aid by $80 million. The U.S. says the aid is contingent on Palestinian leadership fighting terror and violence. During recent talks with Israeli and Palestinian leaders, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry also reached an agreement with Israel's Prime Minister to install security cameras at Islam's third holiest site, the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Hundreds of surveillance cameras already operate in Jerusalem's Old City. Installing them at Al-Aqsa is meant to prove Israel's government is not trying to take control of the site.
Israel will continue to enforce its long-standing policy. Muslims pray on the Temple Mount, non-Muslims visit the Temple Mount. Israel believes that those who visit or worship on the Temple Mount must be allowed to do so in peace, free from violence, from threats, from intimidation, and from provocations.
The Palestinian Authority rejects the move.
Al-Aqsa is a holy place. It's a holy site. It's not a museum. It's not police station. It's not allowed to change the status quo. The cameras itself is a part of changing the status quo. It's a tool of changing the status quo.
Over 1,000 Palestinians have been arrested by Israeli soldiers in the occupied Palestinian territories since the beginning of October. The Palestinian Prisoners Society said that most of the detentions took place in Al-Khalil, also known as Hebron, and Jerusalem Al-Quds. Palestinian officials say by arresting the Palestinians, Israel aims to suppress any further protests in the cities which host the highest number of illegal settlements.
Well, a senior Palestinian leader says the intifada for Jerusalem Al-Quds will continue until Palestinians achieve freedom from Israel. Hamas's political bureau chief Khalid Mashal said every Palestinian has a responsibility to liberate the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the occupied territories. Mashal said Israel is trying to divide the Al-Aqsa Mosque and turn Jerusalem Al-Quds into a Jewish city. Mashal, who's visiting South Africa, compared Israel with the apartheid regime and the Palestinian struggle with South Africans' fight for freedom. Meanwhile, Palestinians rallied in Gaza on Thursday to support the ongoing fight against Israeli aggression against the occupied territories. They said they're protesting against Israeli tyranny and pledged to continue the perceived intifada to liberate Jerusalem Al-Quds from occupation.
Well, the leader of the Lebanese resistance movement, Hezbollah, has expressed support for Palestinians in their resistance against Israel. During a speech on the occasion of Ashura in Beirut, Sayed Hassan Nasrallah said Lebanese and all freedom-loving people should support the cause of Palestinians and their intifada. Nasrallah pledged to continue the resistance against Israeli plots. He warned Israel and Takfiri terrorists that resistance movements won't ever accept humiliation and will fight back if needed.
والمناشدات والاستغاثات وآن أوان الحصاد والعمليات وسل السيوف وسيل الدماء وفتح السنان يا ابن الضفة اغضب فهو الذي رفع السماء بلا عمد لن يحرر هذا الأرض إلا الغضب يا أهل الضفة اقتلوهم سمموا خناجركم واطعنوهم واذبحوهم فجروهم اسفكوا دماءهم انقضوا عليهم قطعوا أوصالهم شلوا أركانهم زلزلوا الأرض من تحت أقدامهم دوسوا على رؤوسهم إن العملية الاستشهادية القادمة ستكون بالأحزمة الناعمة بإذن الله تبارك وتعالى هذا ما ينتظركم هذا ما يعد لكم هذا كابوسكم هذا ما يعده المشاهدون لكم والله لنقطعن لكم بها أسلاح ولنرسلن لكم الرسائل بالدماء والله لنفتكنكم بها ونجعلكم جثثا هامدة أشلاء متناثرة بإذن المولى تبارك وتعالى هذا ما سيحرر أرضنا هذا ما سيحرر أرضنا بإذن المولى تبارك وتعالى.
תקשיבי, חשבתי זורקים אבנים על הדלת! באתי לרדת למטה,
A magnitude 7.5 earthquake rattled South Asia Monday. The U.S. Geological Survey said the epicenter was near Afghanistan's Hindu Kush mountain range, about 130 miles underground. Tremors lasting 45 seconds were felt as far as Kabul and the capitals of India and Pakistan. The Associated Press reported people in Islamabad rushed out of swaying buildings, some reciting the Quran. In Jammu, India, hospital patients were moved outdoors. A similar scene played out across the region as people gathered in the streets, anticipating aftershocks.
A massive 7.5 earthquake in northern Afghanistan shook buildings from Kabul to Delhi, cutting power and communications in some areas. An Afghan news channel recorded the moment the earthquake struck, forcing the anchor to leave the studio. Officials say more than 250 people have been killed, with the death toll likely to rise. The casualties are mostly in Afghanistan and Pakistan, with several hundred people wounded.
The numbers may increase as the situation looks very bad. We declare emergency here in the hospital. We have enough doctors and are doing our best to treat the affected people.
The U.S. Geological Survey said the epicenter was 130 miles deep and hit within the Hindu Kush Mountains. The bulk of the damage has been in Pakistan, where homes and belongings were reduced to rubble in just 45 seconds.
At around 1400 in the afternoon, we were at our home when the earthquake happened, a strong and dangerous earthquake. Children were scared. One of our relatives called me and said, "Your brother's house just collapsed and there are injured children."
At least 12 students at a girls' school in Afghanistan were killed in a stampede as they fled shaking buildings into Kar province. Another 42 girls were taken to the hospital. Civil and military authorities across the region have mounted rescue operations trying to reach remote areas impacted by the quake. With telecommunications disrupted, officials say the full extent of the damage won't be known for quite some time.
Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair still stands by taking down Saddam Hussein, but years after the 2003 U.S.-led invasion of Iraq, Blair told CNN's Fareed Zakaria he is sorry for some things, like bad intelligence reports on weapons of mass destruction that never materialized.
I can also apologize, by the way, for some of the mistakes in planning, and certainly our mistake in our understanding of what would happen once you removed the regime.
Blair also took some blame for the volatile situation in Iraq today, including the rise of the Islamic State.
Of course, you can't say that those of us who removed Saddam in 2003 bear no responsibility for the situation in 2015, but it's important also to realize, one, that the Arab Spring, which began in 2011, would also have had its impact on Iraq today, and two, ISIS actually came to prominence from a base in Syria and not in Iraq.
More than 3,000 U.S. service members are still in Iraq, helping Iraqi forces. According to the website Iraq Body Count, more than 4,000 U.S. troops were killed during the Iraq War. Britain, a key U.S. ally, lost 179.
It's high stakes on the high seas. The Pentagon has authorized the USS Lassen to sail near islands built by China in the South China Sea, a move that risks intensifying tensions in the region. That's because Beijing considers those international waters theirs.
Well, Brooke, a defense official confirms that the U.S. Navy is prepared to send a destroyer within 12 miles of China's man-made islands in the South China Sea within the next 24 hours. That plan has the president's approval. Why is 12 miles key? 12 miles, those are internationally recognized as sovereign waters, but the U.S. does not recognize these man-made islands as sovereign territory of China. They say these are international waters, and this sailing of a Navy ship inside that 12-mile line would be a message from the U.S. Navy saying these are international waters. This is the second time this year that the U.S. Navy would have sent such a message. You may remember, Brooke, that in May of this year, we flew on a U.S. surveillance aircraft, a P-8 Poseidon aircraft. Those images you're seeing right now were taken by that aircraft over those man-made islands. They flew that aircraft very close to these islands, again, as a message to say that the U.S. not only does not recognize the seas as being Chinese sovereign seas, but the air above those man-made islands. And you may remember that during our trip then, we got a lot of warnings, a lot of angry warnings from the Chinese Navy saying, U.S. Navy aircraft, go away, this is Chinese territory. But this is a major issue that the U.S. and China have not been able to come to agreement on. And this sailing of this ship, like this flying of that airplane, is a strong message from Washington that they still don't agree.
Russian President Vladimir Putin says the U.S. is undermining international security by using the pretext of a so-called Iranian nuclear threat. Putin made the remarks recently at the annual Valdai International Discussion Club in the southern resort city of Sochi.
Under pretext of nuclear missile threat from Iran, as we all know, the fundamental basis of contemporary international security, Treaty on the Limitation of Anti-Ballistic Missile Systems, was destroyed. The US withdrew unilaterally from it.
The Russian leader said the excuse for the U.S. to create a missile defense system in Europe has disappeared. That's because world powers have reached a deal with Iran on its nuclear program. He noted Washington used the alleged Iranian nuclear deal threat to mislead the world. Putin cited the anti-missile tests conducted by the U.S. Navy in Europe earlier in October. These tests, he said, mean that Russia, along with the entire world, were misled once again.
One of the most enduring images of Vladimir Putin flexing his military might inside a Russian Navy submersible. But tonight, some are questioning if Putin is now doing more than just putting on a show under the sea. A new report from the New York Times cites more than a dozen unnamed U.S. officials raising concerns Russian submarines and spy ships are aggressively patrolling near important undersea cables. Massive fiber optic lines spanning from continent to continent, carrying the bulk of the world's internet communications.
Their goals are to humiliate the United States and show that it can't defend itself, and to project naval power into the Atlantic, thus showing the United States and Europe, we're here, you have to deal with us and take us seriously, and we can propose a threat to your most vital interests.
According to the Times, officials are concerned that if a larger conflict between Russia and the West broke out, a Russian ship could locate an internet cable on the sea floor, lower a submersible down to it, and either attach a wiretap to eavesdrop on it, or worse, sever the cable, cutting off a crucial data pipeline.
They're extremely vital. They're the core of our communications infrastructure. So we hear a lot of talk about the cloud, for example, and we think of it as something nebulous, something in the sky. Well, the cloud is really under the ocean.
Jonathan Yembo works with a company which monitors telecom infrastructure. He says there are hundreds of these cables stretching across the ocean floors, enough, he says, to span the globe at the equator 15 times. Yembo says if multiple undersea cables were cut at once, it could harm American business and government interests and could have even more catastrophic effects on Europe. Tonight, the Pentagon won't confirm the concerns raised in the New York Times. One U.S. official says while the Russians could tamper with the cables, the U.S. hasn't seen a significant increase in Russian activity where the cables are located. There's also been no evidence of any actual cable cutting. But newspaper reports say the Russian ship the Yantar, which is equipped with submersibles capable of cutting undersea cables, has been spotted cruising in the Atlantic on its way to Cuba, not far from where at least one cable is located.
The Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act, or CISA, cleared another hurdle today as the Senate voted 83-14 for cloture, swiftly bringing debate surrounding the controversial bill to an end. Co-sponsor of the bill, Senator Richard Burr, a Republican from North Carolina, says a vote will now take place on amendments to CISA next week. Joining me to discuss the bill is legal and media analyst Lionel of Lionel Media. Thank you so much for joining me on this. What is your assessment of this bill to begin with? Some call it faux cybersecurity. It's cloaked as cybersecurity. It's really spying.
That's exactly what it is. Remember one thing. The internets, as someone once said, was the genie that was out of the bottle. The government, from day one, has tried to claw this back. And they will try everything in their power, evoking every image from cybersecurity to national security to terrorism to preventing the next 9/11 to you name it. They're also going to be using a whole host of tools such as intellectual property laws and a host of others. What this is about is control.
The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. It's the U.S. government agency charged with protecting Mother Nature. And that sounds good, right? I mean, we probably should try to keep the planet habitable since we haven't found another one yet to live on. What doesn't sound so good is a recent report by the watchdog group Open the Books, which outlines how the EPA, this agency of benevolence, has amassed a crazy arsenal of military gear. The report is called Open the Books Oversight Report, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. It analyzed $110 billion worth of EPA contracts to figure out just how the EPA plans to protect the environment and fight climate change. And it reveals just how militaristic Mother Nature's American protector has become. For instance, the EPA spent $6.6 million in joint, quote-unquote, policing projects with Homeland Security, because I guess nature now falls under Homeland's sprawling scope of authority, too. The EPA also has a criminal enforcement program, which spent over $700 million fighting what they call envirocrime, whatever that's supposed to mean. That program also pays the salary of about 200 special agents, who each earn over $200,000 a year. So I guess they're like Mother Nature's American, extremely well-paid police force. But the really crazy part of the report is the list of military hardware that the EPA now owns in order to protect the environment. They've bought over $2 million worth of military-grade guns and ammunition. They've bought body armor, camouflage and deceptive equipment, drones, night vision technology, radar equipment, troop transport vehicles, tactical gear, Bushmaster rifles, mobile GPS units, amphibious assault ships, and more. Amphibious assault ships! This is how well armed the EPA is. Now, I'm not saying the EPA does or doesn't need an army to fight corporations or nefarious individuals who are intent on trashing our planet. I'm just saying, how the hell did society get to a place where Mother Nature needs an army to protect her? Sounds like we need an agency to protect us from ourselves.
We have discovered that there was a comic series from the 1960s called Thunder Agents, and these were superheroes working for the United Nations, and now we have just heard news that there will be produced into a major action movie and then a television series. I mean, part of the fascination with comics is a lot of people, I mean, they basically affiliate and identify with a superhero who fights crime, fights injustice, and tries to create a more safer, healthier world. And that's exactly what the United Nations is doing. The UN fights conflict, fights human rights violations, tries to create better conditions for the future. And therefore, there are no superheroes in real life, but we have a United Nations which is doing the work of superheroes.
In a polarized world, and which is the world we live in, to be able to bond over our pop culture is a truly wonderful thing. One of the magic things about Thunder Agents is they don't come from another planet. Nobody's been bitten by an insect that gave them powers. These are everyday people in all walks of life from many different countries around the world. They are recruited, and then they are given an identity. They are given a technological device from the scientists from different countries in the UN that gives each one a superpower. And with that superpower comes severe moral choices and severe consequences. So there's a human element of it, but it's about everyday people who have an opportunity to become empowered.
Some of the Republican candidates complained that it took superhuman strength to get through the last debate. This time around, will they be channeling their secret powers to succeed? It's the subject of this week's State of the Cartoonian. Tweeting this cartoon, our friends at CNBC this week announced which Republicans made their debate. It was all very super heroic, as if this is the new lineup for the Super Friends at the Hall of Justice.
In the Great Hall of the Justice League.
Christie the Crusader, Killer Carly, or depending on your point of view, maybe this is the Legion of Doom?
The Legion of Doom. dedicated to a single objective, the conquest of the universe.
The traffic disruptor. Lady of layoffs. It was all a theme this week. Jeb Bush was stumped when asked to name his favorite comic book character. Landing eventually on Supergirl, star of an upcoming TV show whose superpower, according to Bush, is being attractive.
I saw that there's a Supergirl is on TV. I saw it when I was working out this morning. There's an ad promoting Supergirl. She looked pretty hot. I don't know what channel it's on, but I'm looking forward to that.
Of course, we already knew that Donald Trump not only has a favorite superhero, he fancies he is one.
Are you Batman?
I am Batman.
Not everyone sees him that way, of course. A Mexican comic book features its hero punching the lights out of a villain. He looks an awful lot like Donald Trump. The theme will continue this Wednesday when, on the debate stage, they all vie to be Captain America.
When Captain America throws his mighty shield.
Seguo con grande preoccupazione la situazione di forte tensione e di violenza.
Speaking ahead of the Angelus at the conclusion of the Holy Mass on Sunday, Pope Francis appealed once again for peace in the Holy Land. I'm following with great concern the situation of high tension and violence that afflicts the Holy Land, he said. In this moment, there is need of great courage and great strength of soul in order to say no to hatred and vengeance and to carry out acts of peace. Pope Francis prayed that God might strengthen both political leaders and people, that they might have the courage to oppose violence and to take concrete steps aimed at decreasing tensions. In the present Middle East context, he said, peace in the Holy Land is more crucial than ever. God, he said, and the good of humanity seek this of us.
Pope Francis criticized church leaders on Saturday who, quote, bury their heads in the sand on matters pertaining to family issues. The Pope's comments come after a 3-week bishops' meeting or synod on issues including divorce and homosexuality. The group issued a document stating that bishops and priests can work with Catholics who divorce and remarry in civil ceremonies on a case-by-case basis to decide whether he or she could be fully reintegrated into the church. Regarding homosexuals, the document repeated the church's stance that there was, quote, no foundation whatsoever for same-sex marriage, and that it could not even remotely be compared to heterosexual unions. During a news conference, Cardinal Christoph Schoenborn of Vienna said many of the 270 bishops felt homosexuality was still too delicate a theme in their countries.
To have left it out does not mean that it's not an important topic for the Church in Europe and North America. But on a universal level, you have to respect political and cultural situations.
After the document was issued, Pope Francis said the synod had laid bare the closed hearts which frequently hide, even behind the church's teachings or good intentions, in order to sit in the chair of Moses and judge.